So look, you're a kid from Salford, and you're in a band who are having as many hits, if not more hits than the Beatles, and you decide, probably at the peak of this, to go your own way and try it in California. Was it a huge decision to leave the Hollies?
No, it was not. It should have been, but it wasn't. And the reason is that I'd heard me and David and Stephen sing. And once I had heard the way that we put our three voices together into one voice, I knew I would have to go back and leave the Hollies and leave my stuff and leave my finances and equipment and go and follow this sound. I'm a musician. That's what my heart told me to do, and that's what I did.
But the harmonies in the Hollies were pretty good. Bus Stop?
Not bad.
That's a great song.
You know, there were some good pop songs, you know, but the world is different than that, you know. That was okay then in the 60s, but today is a very different world, you know. We've got the Trump administration in the United States dividing people with fear and lies, and our very democracy is in danger here, and so those kind of times call for different kind of songs, and we had them then.
Now, before we get onto that, and I do want to talk about today, but the Hollies turned down Marrakesh Express and Teach Your Children. That must have hacked you off, but it must have really hacked them off when you take them and make them number one across the planet.
Yeah, I had a smile about that one. But then don't forget the Hollies had, 2 or 3 top 10 records after I left? Bugger them.
But then they come back with Albert Hammond's Air That I Breathe.
Right.
Did you think that's a pretty good one?
No, they did pretty good songs, and you know, Long Cool Woman and He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. Decent songs, really. Very decent.
Now, you go to Laurel Canyon. Now, I've seen documentaries about Laurel Canyon, and when you hear about the Muscle Shoals Studios or the Memphis Horns, can you explain to me what Laurel Canyon was like?
Well, to me then, you know, being an Englishman from the north of England, it was kind of paradise. It was sunny all the time, kind of like it is today. Lots of music being made, lots of love being fallen into, you know, not only with David and Stephen and their music that we could create, but there were a lot of very pretty women around too, and there were a lot of drugs around also. It was kind of, you know, for then, it was kind of paradise. It's a different world now, but then it was interesting.
And of course then, in those days, I would imagine the drugs were kind of experimental. The book hadn't been written. There was no crack cocaine. There was no crime because of drugs. So in a way, they were wild times, but I would imagine, Graham, pretty innocent.
Yeah, we didn't see what was wrong with smoking a joint, you know. It's a plant, you know. People smoke tobacco, and that seems to be legal, and that seems to be killing, you know, hundreds of thousands of people a year, but they don't seem to care. So yeah, it was kind of innocent, but it's a very different world now.
We're over at one of those Mama Cass parties, and you're thinking, I'm a kid from Salford. I did Top of the Pops. I never thought I was going to do Top of the Pops. That was number one, and now I'm hanging out with Mama Cass.
I know it. You know, she was very much kind of like the Gertrude Stein of Hollywood. You know, she would invite various people from around different work, you know, actors and movie stars and architects and artists and musicians. She would put together a bunch of interesting people to talk. So she was very much like the Gertrude Stein. And quite frankly, the reason why you and I are speaking right now is because of Cass Elliot.
You've had an incredible career. You still look great, but I believe you left California a few years ago and went to New York. Can you have too much California? I've never been, but can you have too much California?
Oh yes, you can have too much California. You can have too much of anything in your life. And the secret is moderation in everything.
And what about Newton? So New York is home now.
It is.
Are you in Manhattan?
I am. I live in the part of New York that is really New York now. It's changed a great deal. I live down in the Greenwich Village, and it's really old New York. You know, there are no skyscrapers, there are no giant buildings. It's a pretty nice place, and I'm very lucky. And I guess, you know, I lived in Hawaii for 40 years. I guess I just traded jungles.
And what about the UK? When you come back here, do you miss the old place, or is it just nice to dip your toe in the water?
I'm just, you know, I feel very much like I'm just this brain, you know, on the end of a stick. You know, I'm not part of any country. I mean, I'm English. I was born in England. I'll always be English, of course, and I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of the fact that I've been an American citizen for over 40 years also. I didn't want to be throwing musical hand grenades in, not being a part of the country. I thought that would be hypocritical. And so I decided that I wanted to vote. I wanted to express my opinion. America is a very beautiful country. It is very different today. But basically the people there want the same thing as everybody in the world. They want their children to grow up. They want them to be educated. They want them to be fed. They want to give them a better world than they had. And that's what's going on throughout the world, and it's still the same story today.
And you've always wanted the planet to be cleaner and greener. I mean, you were a bit of a trailblazer for that back in the day. Is it because you would have been political if you'd been a milkman or a school teacher, or is it because you thought, I've got a voice, and it's a big voice because of what I do, and I'm going to use it for some good, or does that sound a bit worthy?
No, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I realized that when you had the pleasure of selling millions of pieces of plastic, along with that comes a certain power. In the early days with the Hollies, we couldn't even touch the board. If we wanted more kick drum, we'd have to ask Ron Richards, who would then tell the engineer, who would then put his hand on the board and bring up the kick drum. The moment you started to sell millions of records, the power shifted, and it shifted towards the musicians. And therefore it became, that I could reach over to the board myself and bring up the kick drum or the bass or the vocals or whatever it is I wanted to do. What an interesting life I've had.
And obviously you're playing here tonight. You've got some other gigs in the UK. Is there a current album we should steer people towards?
Let me see. The last one I put out was about 4 months ago, and it was, I realized that there hadn't been a great, for want of a better title, a greatest hits album of my music. Yes, greatest hits of the Hollies. Yes, greatest hits of CSN. Yes, greatest hits of CSNY, but not of my music. And I wrote most of the singles, as you know. And so I decided that I would put the 15 most favorite songs that my fans seem to love. And then I realized that real true fans of my music have probably bought those in different formats, and cassettes and 8-track and CDs and DVDs and Blu-ray, etc. And so I wanted to make it more interesting. And so I went back into my archives, and I've kept our tapes safe for the last 50-odd years. And I'm very proud of that, and particularly in terms of the Universal Music Group fire that happened in Hollywood, where things like Buddy Holly's Masters were destroyed, and the music of many, many other great artists. But I've been taking care of our tapes for all these years, and I'm glad that I was able to be smart enough to do that.
Okay, look, it's been great to meet you. And this over here is Ian Matthews from Matthews Southern Comfort.
Yes.
So
nice record of Woodstock, by the way.
You like his version?
Yeah, of course.
There you go. There's the seal of approval.
Well, they recognized that it was a great song.
Yeah.
And Joni wrote that song, before. A lot of people think that maybe me and David and Stephen and Neil rabbiting on to Joni about how great Woodstock was, because Joni was supposed to play Woodstock, but she was on the Sunday night. On the Monday, she was supposed to be back in New York doing the Dick Cavett Show, which was her first television show and a very major part of her career. And so she was advised by Elliot Roberts and David Geffen, our managers, not to go to Woodstock. So a lot of people think that she wrote Woodstock because me and David and Stephen and Neil were so enthusiastic about what had happened. But that song was 99% finished by the time we got back to New York. So that's how great a writer Joni Mitchell